Good evening, good afternoon to some of you, and welcome. We will start our training session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Again, we'll start it at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Welcome, we're glad to have you. Good evening and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We will start our session in about 2 more minutes. We want to allow others to join the session. So again, we're going to start it in about 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Again, good evening and good afternoon and welcome. We'll start in a couple minutes here. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, welcome. Round two, yes, thanks, James. Welcome again, everyone, welcome. Get my mic set up correctly. Okay, again, welcome everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. My name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic. Thank you for joining us here for our Search Mastery certification. For those of you that were not with me yesterday in the fundamentals, just a little bit of background about myself. I'm actually dialing in from the Midwest. I'm dialing in from the suburbs of Chicago. My background, I've been in IT for over 30 years now. I've worked in the operations center. I worked in database design, database development. Again, my background stems around data. I enjoy training, so for the last 15 years, I've been a technical trainer. All right. Thank you for those that have put their location in the chat. Thank you for sharing. If you were with me yesterday, go ahead and raise your hand or let me know in the chat. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Nat. Thank you, George. Thank you, Matthew. All right, so quite a few of you were with me yesterday. Okay, great. Thanks, Mark, for letting me know you're from Denver. The reason I asked is because a lot of students take the, thanks, James. A lot of students take the fundamentals first, and that's what we taught yesterday. And maybe you've taken the fundamentals before with another trainer. That's fine. It's not a prerequisite. I was just curious, okay? So let's get in here. We're glad to have you to join us for this Search Mastery certification. Here's our agenda. So you and I'll go ahead and introduce you to I'll give you that 500-foot overview. Our objectives are to get into our training environment. So we're gonna give you credentials to log into our training environment, okay? Then you and I will search, parse, and we will take a look at field extraction rules, FERs, okay? Field extraction rules, okay? Then we'll get into some conditional programming and filtering operations. We'll plot our objects on a map. We'll format our results. We'll then look at some moving and rolling averages, identify some trends, look at some outliers, do some comparisons, and then we'll create an alert. Then you'll have the opportunity to go ahead and get certified because the material is fresh in your mind, okay? Of course, after you take the certification and you pass the exam, you can go ahead and fill out the Uber Eats form that I will put in the chat when we get towards the exam. And we're going to send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. Yay. Thank you for joining. Okay. All right. So before we get started, I'll go ahead and turn off my video just to save some bandwidth and allow you to focus on the lecture and the slides. Okay. Right, so what we're seeing, and I'm going to go over these slides rather quickly, ladies and gentlemen, because we have a lot of labs to go through, okay? And these slides are the same slides that are in the fundamentals course as well as, they're in the fundamentals course, okay? So I'm going to hit these to the high points. Now, as I mentioned, in my background, I was in the operations center as well. I didn't have the luxury of building dashboards that could give me notifications. In the Sumo Logic's continuous intelligence platform, you and I can build dashboards from an operational perspective. That operational perspective will give us information about the health of our systems. Are all of our systems up and running? Are there any mean times that we have to identify or resolve? So we can glean some information from an operational dashboard that we can build in the Sumo Intelligence Continuous Intelligence platform. Then we could also build a security dashboard. From a security perspective, we could find out, are there users logging in to our environment from multiple locations simultaneously? Okay, we can find out where users are logging in from. We can find out if there's anyone using or has root access. Okay, again, we can find that out from a security intelligence dashboard. From a business intelligence, we can find out if we issued a marketing campaign, we can see how successful or not it was. We can find out what pages our customers frequently viewing, what are they frequently ordering. So again, from a business perspective, we can build a dashboard to tell us that type of information. And then finally, globally, from a global perspective, we could build an actual dashboard that allows us to compare our data globally, okay? So again, these are examples of dashboards that can be created inside of the CIP, the Continuous Intelligence Platform. And if you're wondering what data is going to be used to build those dashboards, we're going to use whatever you're collecting, those logs, those metrics, those traces, all of that machine data, we're going to use that wherever it comes from, whether it comes from microservices or SaaS services or third party, wherever those data elements you're collecting come from, we're going to utilize that to build these dashboards. Now, what does our tool offer? Our tool offers analytics, okay? Again, we are a multi-tenancy environment. We have multiple apps in our environment. We're able to secure them. You can see that with our actual certifications over to the right. We're SOC 2 certified, we're FedRAMP certified, HIPAA certified. Again, we keep our certifications up to date. One of our core values is we're in it with our customers. And we mean that from the beginning all the way through, okay? And security is high priority on our list. If you need to grow and expand, again, we're scalable, we're elastic, we can grow with you, we're in a cloud, so we can grow. If you need to downsize, again, we can downsize with you as well. You're gonna see today some machine learning and some advanced analytics when we get into the tool a little bit more. Some users or some companies like to incorporate Sumo Logic, so they utilize the APIs, the application programming interfaces, okay? And then on that last tier, your people, what we mean by that is we want to provide you a single source, a single solution that you can provide your answers and share your answers across all lines of your business. Okay, so again, those are the key 4 takeaways. We can build dashboards. We're utilizing your logs, metrics, and traces, your data that you're collecting. We offer analytics, and you can share across all lines of your business. Again, leaning on your imagination, I often use that analogy when I'm explaining this here logical data flow. So in order to get your logs, metrics, and traces into our Sumo Logic cloud-based environment, we need a vehicle, okay? I often mention, hey, imagine a highway. We need a vehicle to transport your data into our environment. That vehicle is called a collector. There's 2 types of collectors. There's installed and they're hosted, okay? Those collectors encrypt, compress, and send. Okay, they define your sources. If you want to learn more about data collections, we teach that in our administration course. And we're going to have 2 of those courses tomorrow. Okay. Now, once your data is in our Sumo Logic environment, then you and I will be able to search through that data, those logs, those metrics, those traces, and analyze them and use those operators that Sumo Logic has inside of it so we can display our results in charts. Okay, now this is where we're going to spend most of our time today on the search and analyzing using operators. And then finally, the last step in the logical data flow is to build visualizations, those key forensic items, dashboards, so we can monitor and set up alerts. Okay, so that's the logical data flow. Get your data in, search through it, display it, use the operators, build dashboards and alerts. Now, once your logs and metrics and traces start coming into Sumo Logic, it gets tagged, okay? Metadata tagged, okay? And what you're seeing is 5 types of metadata tags. The one that we're going to use most often, the one you'll see us use frequently, is the one in bold. The source _ source category is going to be equal to a freely configurable phrase. So for example, I can make it equal to labs Apache era, or maybe I want my prod Apache eras, or maybe I want my UAT Apache access. So I can freely configure that, and you'll see that's the one we're going to use most often, the one in bold. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time again. We are going to allow you to log into our training environment. If you haven't been with us so far, these are the credentials. What I'd like for you to do is think of a 3-digit number, okay? Put that 3-digit number in the chat. Any number you think of, you want, you're going to use that number from 1 to 999. Thank you, James. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, David. Again, if you're going to follow along with us, we need you to put your 3-digit number in the chat window for us. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Mark. All right. Thank you, George. Thank you, Nat. All right, so hopefully that's everyone that plans on logging in. Jeremy and Sham, thank you. Here are the credentials. In order to log into our training environment, you're going to go ahead and open up a browser. You're going to type in the phrase service.sumologic.com. That's the URL to get to our training page. Once you get to our training page, thank you, Queenie, you're then going to go ahead and type in I'm being patient. That's why I'm being quiet. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, so that was sweet. Again, you're typing in service.sumologic.com. Okay. And you know, it wants to make it a challenge for me. Anyone else have any trouble? All right, awesome. So you can go ahead and log in if you're not having any issues. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I just want to make sure I was still on. Thank you. It gets kind of weird after a while if I don't hear anybody. Thanks, Mark. I'm just having trouble getting connected, so let's see if it'll go. Third time's a charm. Yeah, there you go. Hey, I got it. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the slowness of my environment. But again, you're going to go ahead and type in service.sumologic.com. You're going to use as an email address the word training, the plus symbol, the word analyst, and then your 3-digit number at sumologic.com. I don't know why my fingers don't want to act right today. And then the password, of course, is uppercase F for fireworks, exclamation mark. And I probably fat fingered it. Yep, which I did. Let's try it again, see if that works. All right, please confirm that you were able to get in successfully in the chat window, or you can raise your hand, either or. Thanks, Victoria. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sham. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Mark. All right, anyone have any troubles logging in? Please let me know. I don't want to leave anyone. If you wanted to use the same number from yesterday, you're more than welcome to do that. No worries. It's a training environment. Okay. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that did not take the class with me yesterday, I reminded everyone that this training environment, those credentials, yeah, if there's, George, if there's other items in there, like if you see a bunch of tabs open, you can close those tabs. It doesn't matter. You can close those tabs. If you see a bunch of items over there, don't worry about it. You're going to name your items with your initials. So no big deal. Or you can use another number if you want to as well. So whatever you're fancy. Okay. Good question. All right. Anyone not able to get in? All right. So I'll assume everyone was able to get in. Now, again, if you do see a bunch of tabs up here, you can close those tabs. I'm just going to briefly go over this environment for those of you that haven't been in here. So I just go to any one of these tabs and just click on the close all tabs. And I have a fresh desktop. If you came in and you saw just the word Sumo Logic and then you saw these stack of blueberry pancakes, if you hover off of it, it's buttermilk. But if you hover over it, it's blueberry. If you saw the blueberry pancakes and you clicked on them, you'll now see our navigation panel. There's an arrow to the left, to the right of the Sumo Logic. You click on that and it hides it. We won't really need the navigation panel today, ladies and gentlemen. So again, no big deal there. All right. All right, now you and I want to go ahead and get to our labs. Okay. So one of the ways to get to the labs is to, in your continuous intelligence platform, if you click on the home tab, make sure you're in the home tab, and you click on the learn link, okay, you can go down to our documentation, our docs. It's a documentation hub. You can go there. That's going to launch a new browser for you. You can click on, in the start here, you can see the phrase quick start labs and tutorials. If you click on that, that'll take you to all of our labs. You and I are about to go through the search mastery. So if you click on that, that is where we will start. I will paste this in the chat for those of you that are having trouble. There it is for you. If you're in a Google Chrome environment, you can pin your tab. So I'm going to right click on my lab tab and pin it. It left justifies it. The advantage of using the pin is I can toggle between my lab guide and my CIP. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The introduction Again, I'm going to lead you through these labs. This introduction is basically allowing you to log in, telling you how to log into our training environment. Okay, so we've done that. Yay, you guys are awesome, successful, good job. In our lab guide, when you go into a lab and you go down to the bottom of the lab, you'll see a link that allows you to take you to the next lab. So let's go ahead and click on lab 1, search basic metadata and keywords. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this first set of labs takes us sort of slowly, and it then picks up speed. Okay, so we're going to gradually kind of walk you through, then we're going to pick up speed. All right. So here in this lab, we are going to learn the use of metadata and keywords. Why? So we can narrow our scope for our search and improve performance. Odell, why are we doing this again? Because we want to narrow our search scope and improve performance in case that ever appears on an exam somewhere, okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and copy what's under number 1. We are going to look at our access messages for the last 15 minutes. So go ahead and copy that under number 1. Go back to the CIP, and let's go ahead and click on the new button, that blue button, a new log search. Just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, you'll see a blinking cursor. That's where you're going to paste. Whenever you create a new log search, it's going to equate back to the last 15 minutes. We'll talk about the time coming up. Let's go ahead and paste. Let's talk about what we're viewing, what we should see. So here's that metadata tag that we talked about, one of our favorites, our most used, our frequently used, our best practice. Again, underscore source category is equal to labs Apache access. Bring back those messages for the last 15 minutes. Let's now click on the blue magnifying glass. And let's see what we get. So under the actual query area, you see a histogram. That histogram can be hidden at any time by clicking on the word hide. You can click on show if you need to see it again. Under the histogram, you see the word done, the elapsed time, and the total amount of results. If your number's not like mine, that's not the concern here, as long as you got numbers now, okay? Now, if we go down, over to the left, we have a messages tab, okay? Now, ladies and gentlemen, in case this appears on an exam, this area over here to the left is referred to as our field browser, okay? So this is our field browser. We can see that we're going to display 2 fields, time and message. We'll talk more about the field browser coming up. We are looking at page 1 of 284. This page displays 25 items per page. If you ever needed to change the display items, you go over to the gear symbol and go to the display preferences and change that object, okay? So again, we got our results. All right, let's go ahead and build on this. Let's type in the query. Let's append to this query. Let's add a space. Let's type the operator and any case. Any case. This is case insensitive, ladies and gentlemen. Case insensitive. All right, so we add a space after the and we're going to type in the number 404. That's our keyword. So first of all, realize, ladies and gentlemen, that the and is implied. It's optional. We could run this and it would run correctly with the and operator. Well, Odell, why do we even use the and? You never know who's going to read your queries. It's good for readability and helps you understand, okay? So again, we want to look at our Apache access messages that only have 404s in them because we're using a keyword. That 404 is a keyword. Let's go ahead and run that for the last 15 minutes. And again, we see our histogram, Status is done, elapsed time, results. We can also see the session ID if we ever need it. In our field browser, we're seeing the time and the messages being displayed. We now are seeing page 1 of 9. We see the time of the message, and we can see 404 is highlighted in each row of the message. Okay. Let's take it a little bit further, ladies and gentlemen. Let's highlight the 404. Let's highlight the 404, and let's replace it with a paren, an open paren, the word error, case insensitive. The space, another word, the word or, a space, and we want to type in case insensitive, the word check, and some of you might be familiar with SQL. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. We have similar features as SQL. One of them is using the asterisk. That represents a wildcard. Then we'll add a closing paren. So Odell, what are we doing here? What we're doing is demonstrating how you can manipulate this query, okay? So we started out saying we want to look at our metadata tag underscore source category equal to labs Apache access, and we also want to see the keywords either error or anything beginning with the word check, okay? And we're going to do that for the last 15 minutes, okay? So when we run that, you of course get your results. Of course, you get your display fields. You're seeing one of however many pages you have. And if you scroll through, you'll see checkout because that's one of the keywords that's in the message, or you'll see error, okay? Again, we're demonstrating how you can utilize wildcards in your search criteria, okay? Now, let's look at another source. But before we do that, I want to point out to you, and I want you to see how this message is formatted for a second, okay? So if I look at my first row, I see there's the IP address. Then I see a timestamp. Then I see some URL and then status codes and so forth, okay? Again, the way this message is formatted, it gives you the IP address, then the timestamp. These are from our access logs. These are how the messages are formatted, okay? Now, let's take this query a step further. Let's replace or highlight everything after the Apache bracket. Let's replace or highlight everything after the Apache bracket. And let's go ahead and put the word error, case insensitive. So now we're going to search our source category, we're going to search our error logs from our labs Apache. Now, we want to do this for 45 minutes, okay? Let's learn something about our time, okay? So over here in the time, as I mentioned, when you create a new log search, it's going to equate to the last 15 minutes. But you might not want the last 15 minutes. So if you click that value, you have 3 tabs, okay? You have relative, where you have a list of relative times. You have recent, if you've been in the environment and you've used some recent numbers, they'll be there. And then you have custom, if you want to change the date and the time, okay? Now you and I, if we click on relative again, and let's say we know we want to run this query for the last 45 minutes, but we don't see the last 45 minutes. So Odell, if I don't see it, you mean I have to just deal with, no. In order to make this work, I want to demonstrate how do you utilize this and create your own time periods, okay? So I'm going to click off of it and then click on it again so it's highlighted. So when that value is highlighted, I start out with a minus symbol and I type in 45, okay? Now, if I hover over it, it tells me you're going to either put M for minutes, D for days, etc. So we're going to go ahead and put M for minutes, because we want our query to run for the last 45 minutes. So the moral of the story here, ladies and gentlemen, you can edit this field, start out with a minus symbol, then put your numeric value, and then put the timestamp, time period, right? So let's go ahead and run our error logs for the last 45 minutes. Again, we get our histogram, we get the status, the elapsed time, the total results. I got over 5,000 results. I see in my field browser the time and the message. I see I'm looking at page 1 of over 200 pages, okay? Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, if we take a look at this, these messages are totally different. If you recall, when we looked at our Apache access messages, it was the IP address, then the timestamp. Here we're seeing the timestamp, we're then seeing the message, and we may or may not see an IP address. We see a timestamp, we see a message here where it says client, then we see the IP address. So again, my point here, ladies and gentlemen, so you'll be aware as we go down the line, the messages from the error logs are different than the messages from the access logs. That's important, okay? They're formatted differently, all right? All right, now let's take this query a step further, okay? Let's go ahead and we are gonna look at our errors, but let's go ahead and type in an OR operator, OR. That's an explicit. There's nothing implied about an OR, okay? Now I wanna add a space and I wanna demonstrate some of the features of the tool as well. If you notice, when we clicked in our query area, we saw a bunch of metadata tags. Well, this tool will allow you to click ahead, okay? So if we wanted to, we can click on that source category. We could scroll or look for, but we're gonna go ahead and type in our labs. We'll add a slash there, and then we'll type in Apache, and then we'll see we can choose our access. So again, I just want you to be aware you will have that capability where you can click ahead. So Odell, what is this query doing? Great question. It's essentially doing the same thing that we just saw. It's bringing back all of the error or all of the access, which is essentially saying bring back all of things, right? That's essentially what it's doing, okay? So when we run that, we're going to do that again. We can do that for the last 45 minutes. Go ahead and run that. Now, a few features I want to make you aware of. Okay. So we see our histogram. We see that we have over 27,000 results. Okay. These are bringing back both access and errors. So when I look at these messages, I can see these are my access messages. I can see the IP address is first. And if I eventually scroll down, I'll get to some error messages where I see the actual timestamp is first, okay? And that's a couple pages down in there, but you'll see in my error messages, they're formatted a little differently, okay? So here's my error, and I can see this. Now this says the timestamp is first, okay? I keep pointing that out because it's gonna be an issue coming up and I want you to be aware of it. All right, now, here's the feature that I wanted to point out to you. Over to the left, ladies and gentlemen, again, I talked about our field browser, okay? You and I are looking at two sources. One of the techniques that you can use in our tool is in the field browser, you can click on the name of the field, not the checkbox. You can click on the name. So if I want to click on source category, what it does for me, it says, oh, of these 27,000 results, 21,000 of them are from access. 5,000 are from error, okay? Odell, how did you do that? Well, all I said was, I know that I'm using source categories. These items, we'll talk about them coming up, but they were part of field extraction rules. So I can use them. Even though they're not being displayed, I still can use them. So all I did was just click on the source category. And when I click on just that word, again, I'm seeing the breakdown. Okay, so that's just a little technique and tip I want you to be aware of. All right, let's go ahead and highlight in our query everything after the first occurrence of Apache /. highlight everything or remove everything after the first occurrence of Apache slash. Put an asterisk there. You know what that's going to do, ladies and gentlemen? That's saying, hey, bring back everything under the labs Apache directory. So however many other directories you have, bring them all back, okay? And we're going to do that for the last 45 minutes. And of course, that's going to essentially bring back the same thing. This is what I meant when I said it brings back the same thing when I said it earlier. So this is same as the OR, okay? So again, I have over 27,000 results, okay? I can go over to my field browser, click on the word source category, and again, I can see the breakdown. I only have 2 sources under the Apache. I only have 2 folders under the Apache directory. That's access and error, okay? All right, let's go back to the lab guide so we can see what we've completed. So you and I started out with number 1. We did number 2. We completed number 3, completed number 4, completed number 5, and we just completed number 6, okay? Let's go ahead and highlight under number 7, and let me describe what a live tail is, okay? Copy that query under number 7 and go back to the CIP and create a new log search. And go ahead and paste and run your query. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we should not be creating a new log search. We should be creating a new live tail, a live tail. Pardon me. I'm so used to creating that. And then run it. Okay. Now, let's talk about a live tail while it's trying to run for you, some of you. Okay. First of all, there's more than 10 of us in this class. We have set a governor on the live tails. You can only run 10 concurrent live tails at once. So it's more than 10 of us in here. Some of you might get an error message when you're trying to run the live tail. What is a live tail, Odell? Great question. This is typically something an administrator would use, where he or she would run a live tail to view the messages as they're being ingested into Sumo logic. So this is something that he or she would do to look at the messages as they're being ingested, okay? Now, you can see that I have a keyword 404, but my messages have 404, but they're hard to see, okay? So one of the other techniques that you can utilize on the live tail is over to the right where you see the blue running. If you go 2 icons over to that, you'll see the word highlight. And if you type in the word 404, the number 404, and you hit the enter key, now as your messages are being ingested, they'll be highlighted, okay? And lastly, you also have the ability to, just like we were able to do earlier in our log search, I can replace everything after Apache and use an asterisk as a wild card, okay? I'll hurry up and get out of here in case some of you are getting the error message that you can't run the log search. I want you all to have that opportunity. So you can see my messages. Again, I can add highlights if I want to as well. So I'm gonna close out of the live tail. Some of you should be able to run it if you're having problems now, okay? All right, one of the things I like to do here, let's go back to our lab guide. One of the things I like to do is go through the quiz questions just to get our minds focused on taking the exam at the end, okay? So you can put in the chat true or false. I'll go through each one of them. Number 1, keywords are case sensitive. Thanks, Jeremy. Jeremy says no. Great, you guys are correct. It's false. You heard Odell emphasize case insensitive so much, you're probably tired of hearing it. That's correct. Case insensitive. All right. Next question. And is implicit and ors are explicit. All right, Jeremy. All right, Matthew. All right, Victoria. All right, George. You all are correct. That's true. You also heard Odell say, and is implied. Ors are explicit. Very good. Mark, I don't know what you meant there, but okay. Question number 3. keywords, and metadata can use wildcards for LiveTail. You just saw me use an asterisk, ladies and gentlemen. You all should have that one correct. It should be true. All right, so let's pick it up. Let's go ahead and click on Lab 2 in the bottom right corner. Let's continue on. You guys are doing a great job. That was easy. Good stuff. Now, we want to use basic operators to parse. Before we get into the lab, let me do a few things for you, ladies and gentlemen. I often tell students, I don't know everything in this tool, but what I will share with you is a resource. And my resource, your resource, our resource should be help.sumologic.com. Okay. Now, I'm digressing, ladies and gentlemen. You don't need to do this. I just wanted to demonstrate to you about parsing operators. Okay. So I'm going out to our help. I'm typing in parse operators. I'm searching for it. It gives me a bunch of items. About 95% of the time, that first one is what you want. I'll click on the parse operators. This is what I really want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Be aware that there's more than one type of parse operator, okay? There is a parse anchor. There's a parse regex, parse JSON, parse key value, parse CSV, delimit, and so forth. I don't expect you to remember this. I do expect you to use the resource to find out information, okay? So again, there's multiple types of parsing. Now, let me kind of distinguish between these two, because these are the two that we're going to use. The parse anchor, we've used in fundamentals. If you've taken the fundamentals, we use the parse anchor in fundamentals. The parse anchor is position-based. So we anchor on something that's never going to change. And again, we highlight everything because it's position-based, okay? Whereas the parse regex, it doesn't care where things are. It's going to look for a pattern, okay? So again, that's the major difference. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is he telling us this? If you think about those two different sources and the messages and how they're formatted differently, it'll come together shortly, okay? So again, just be aware these are all the parsing operators. There's more than just two. All right, ladies and gentlemen, under number 1 in lab number 2, let's go ahead and highlight that and copy it to memory and go and create a new log search. So let's go back to the CIP. You can close any other log searches that you have open. You don't need them if you don't want to, okay? It's not mandatory, but I like closing them, keep a kind of sort of a clean desktop. All right, now, you may have learned this from me yesterday or in one of the other classes. I want to comment out the second row of code because I only want to see the first row so we can step through this, okay? The method of commenting out is the double slash, all right? You and I are gonna run this query. Again, we're running everything under the labs Apache directory, okay? And we're gonna run that for the last 15 minutes. So again, I'm only running the top line of code. Now for readability, one of the things that we can do is we can place our lines of code on separate lines. And how we do that is we add a pipe symbol. But let's first take a look here what we have. So you know, of course, what this is bringing back, ladies and gentlemen, is bringing back our access. And I'll scroll through and you'll see error messages, okay, eventually, all right? And I could go to the shortcut that Odell taught us about. I can go to the field browser and just click on the name and see, okay, of those 8,100 messages, 6,500 are access and 1,500 are error. So again, I have that technique as well. All right, now that next line of code. Now let's talk about this for a second. If we want to display our output in a chart, we need an aggregate. Again, if we want to display our output in the chart, we need an aggregate, okay? Min, max, average, count, sum, those are all aggregates. If you notice on the second line of code, we're using the pipe symbol, which says, hey, continue on with our expression. We're going to use the operator count by, and notice we're using a special technique. It's a placeholder. That underscore is a placeholder, okay? But Odell, how do we know to use source? Where is the underscore source coming from? Okay, great question, ladies and gentlemen. Just be aware it's coming from your field browser. So these fields are although they're not being displayed, they are accessible to you. We'll talk more about them, but again, all we're doing is saying, hey, count by my source, and we use the underscore because again, it's one of the fields, so we use the technique where it's a placeholder, and we're going to run that for the last 15 minutes. Now, what's going to happen when we run this count by is going to generate an aggregates tab. Well, wait a minute, Odell, I thought you said that we needed an aggregate. Yeah, you do. You need an aggregate to generate an aggregates tab. There's it is. You still have your original messages tab, that's still there, but now that you have that count by, you have an aggregates tab, and you can see our numbers, okay? And if we wanted to, we can actually now display our values in an output. Wow, how did we get that? Because we added an aggregate, all right? All right, let's build off of this here. Now, let's go back to our CIP. Let's make this easy for ourselves. And let's go ahead and highlight under number 3. I want you to highlight under number 3, all 3 lines, the last 3 lines of code. Again, highlight under number 3 in lab number 2, the last 3 lines of code, and copy that. Okay. Let's go back to the CIP. Let's highlight that count, the row with the count on it, just that row. Let's highlight that, and let's paste over it. Now, I'm going to demonstrate another technique to you, okay? Now, this technique is going to allow us to comment out more than 1 line at a time. I could go row by row and double slash, double slash, double slash. I could do it that way. Or, I want you to listen to me. On my Mac, I'm going to click my cursor to the left of that line, and I'm going to click down on the Options key. On your machine, if you're not using a Mac, you're going to use the Alt key. Notice my mouse changes. I'm now dragging my left mouse pointer down, and it draws a solid line blinking. Okay, I let everything go. I see that blinking line. Now that means that anything that I apply, it's going to apply to all those rows. Okay, and I want to use the double slash. Odell, how did you do that? That was too quick. I don't know how you did that. Can you do that again? Sure. Okay. So again, what I did was I clicked, because I want to comment out these 3 lines of code. Click to the left of that pipe. On my Mac, I use the Options key. My mouse now changes. You're going to use the Alt key if you're not on a Mac. And then you just drag your mouse down. Okay, and then there's a solid line there. You let your mouse and your Option key go, solid line there, and then you can put the double slash. Okay, again, I wanted to do that so we could step through the code. All right, now the first line of code, if we run that for the last 15 minutes, you know it's going to bring back everything under Apache. You guys are already aware of that. Now, before we run the second line, let's look at the data, okay? And let's look at the parse statement, okay? It says, let's continue this expression. Let's use the parse regex. Let's declare a new field and call it IP address. Let's look for a pattern of 1 to 3 digits, period, 1 to 3 digits, period, 1 to 3 digits, period, 1 to 3 digits. That sounds like it's looking for an IP address to me. So again, using the parse regex is declaring the field name and looking for a pattern. Okay, let's run that for the last 15 minutes. Now this works perfectly because our messages are not formatted the same. Okay, so we know in our access messages, it went and it found the IP address right away. Whereas when it looked to the error messages, it had to skip over the time and then get to the actual error message. the IP address. Okay, and I'll get to one so you can visually see it. It's always good to see things. All right, I went too fast. I just saw some. All right, so here, okay, so it did find this IP address right here, this 205.22. It found it because it was based on a pattern. Okay. Now, the next line of code is going to go ahead and give us that aggregate. We're counting by the IP address. Remember, the IP address column or field was declared in our parse regex. Okay, so we're going to run that for the last 15 minutes. We have an aggregates tab because we have a count by. We're seeing our IP addresses and the total count. Okay. Lastly, this where statement wants us to only see the counts that are greater than 500. Okay. And again, notice that in the line above the line of code above, it's using the count operator. There's no underscore. In the last line, it's using the underscore count as a placeholder. Okay. And if you notice, it also looks like the column header. Okay. So again, we want where our underscore count is greater than 500 over the last 15 minutes. These are the IP addresses that have counts greater than 500. Okay. Now you and I can take it a step further because we have an aggregates tab. We can go ahead and plot our items on a pie chart. Okay. All right, very good. Okay, let's go back to the CIP. So we did all of number 1, 2, and 3. Let's grab everything under number 4, everything under number 4. In this query, we want to see the top 10 source IP addresses by bandwidth usage. Okay, so we're going to have to parse out the byte size as well as the IP address. Okay, so let's copy this. Let's go back to the CIP. We can create a new long search. If you want to overlay the other one, you can do that. Doesn't matter. All right. Now, again, I'm going to step through this code. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I want you to be able to see what's going on. So I'm going to comment out everything. So first of all, I'm bringing back my metadata of all of my access labs, okay, over the last 15 minutes. So, you know, these are only access, ladies and gentlemen. So it's formatted, all these are formatted the same. So we don't necessarily have to use a parse regex because again, all the items are the same, okay? But we are using the parse regex. We're going to declare the IP address. It's going to look for that pattern, the 1 to 3 digits, the period, 1 3 digit period, et cetera, okay? And it'll parse that out. All right, so notice in our field browser, we now have that new column declared called IP address. It's now a display column, and the tool has went and used that pattern in each one of these rows to pull out the IP address. Okay. Now we want to take it a step further. We want to look for 200. Okay. So in each message, we want to look for 200. Once we find 200, we want to parse out the next field, which we're going to call size. So we're looking for 200. The next field after that, we're going to call size. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. So now, again, in our field browser, we not only have the IP address, we now have a new column that we declared as an alias called size. Okay, here's the column size. It looked for the 200, grab the size, 200, grab the size, etc. Okay, next, we want to go ahead and sum. Here's that aggregate. We're going to sum up the size. Oh, no, where did size come from? Remember, we declared that in the column above. So again, we're summing the size. We're going to create a new field called total bytes. And we're summing our size by our IP address. Okay, so let's run that line of code over the last 15 minutes. So here's that aggregates tab. We got that because of the sum. We see our IP addresses and we can see the total bytes. Okay. Now, the last line of code here, we want to see our top 10 IP addresses by total bytes. So again, we're using the top operator. Now, be aware, ladies and gentlemen, that some of our operators sort in descending order by default. Be aware, ladies and gentlemen, that some of our operators sort in descending order by default. This is one of them. The top will sort this in descending order by default. So when we run this over the last 15 minutes, again, we see our aggregates tab and things are sorted in descending order by our total bytes. You know, of course, we could have clicked on the column headers. You also are aware that if we want to change that to ascending, we would just add ASC on the last line of the top where the top is, and now our items in ascending order, okay? So again, be aware you have that capability. All right, going back, CIP. All right. All right, so this is a good breaking time before we get into lab 3. So if there aren't any questions on anything we covered up to this point, let's go ahead and take our 5-minute break. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you got an opportunity to stretch, breathe, exhale, get away from the actual monitor for a moment. All right, so far you guys have done an awesome job. We have completed lab number 2. Let's go ahead and click on the link in the bottom right corner for lab number 3, parsing options. Okay. And we want you to be aware that we have an option in our tool that's turned on automatically. It's the dynamic parsing option. And we want you to be able to take advantage of this. So those JSON messages that you have, if you leave the option auto parsing mode turned on, if you leave that on, it's on automatically, but if you don't mess with it, what the tool is going to do, the advantage of leaving that on is any JSON log messages, the tool is going to automatically parse out those items. So again, it's going to do dynamic parsing. It's going to extract the JSON fields when you run the query at search time. Well, Odell, I don't see the advantage of that. Well, it will save you from having to parse out those fields because that dynamic parsing is parsing it for us automatically. Odell, I still don't know what you're talking about. No worries. Ladies and gentlemen, together, let's go ahead and copy what's under number 1. Copy the entire query under number 1. We're going to look at our CloudTrail logs, okay? We're going to run this query in a new log search, okay? So let's go ahead and create a new log search. And let's paste. I am going to comment out the count so you can see how the actual CloudTrail logs look, okay? And we're going to run this for, let's change to 60 minutes, okay? So we can get a little bit more data. Well, how do you change the time? Well, you just click where it says 15, go to relative and choose last 60 minutes, okay? So we're running our CloudTrail logs for the last 60 minutes. Now, first of all, be aware of how these messages are formatted. So we see the key and the values, the key and the values, key and the values, etc. Now, let's talk about that mode that Odell mentioned. Up in your query, up to the right of the blue search bar, the magnifying glass, to the right of that, you should see a gear symbol, okay? That gear symbol, if you click on it, it has 2 options. One of them is turned on by default. That's that auto parsing mode. And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to automatically extract your JSON items to make them fields, to make them appear in our field browser. Well, Odell, I don't know what you mean. What I mean here. When we ran this query, if we take a look at my screen, you see I have the key value, the key and the value. Your user identity has more items underneath it, okay? So here's these items. I would have to right click on them normally and parse them out because they wouldn't be visible, okay? But since we have this option on, auto parsing mode, when I go down in my field browser and look at the user identity and click on the arrow, I can see those additional fields. So this option, the advantage of it is it parses out these fields for JSON messages automatically to save you and I from having to do them manually, okay? Anyhow, the next line of code is going to ask us to count by the AWS region. Well, where did it get AWS region from, Odell? If you remember, in your field browser, these fields were parsed out using the auto parsing for my JSONs. So again, that's where that AWS region comes from. So when we run that, we're going to get an aggregates tab and we'll see our counts by AWS regions. So we can see the counts by regions. Odell, could we have in our messages tab clicked on the AWS region, just the word that's in the display fields? Could we have just clicked on that and saw the breakdown? Absolutely. That's another way of checking it. Yep, you're right. You could have done that. Looked at your aggregates and say, oh, the numbers they look about right. Okay. All right. Good job. You guys are awesome. All right, now let's talk about the no drop. Okay. So the no drop option forces the results to include the messages that do not match any part of the parse expression. What do you mean, Odell? What does that mean? So basically, when we use a parse, it filters out. So when you parse, it doesn't meet the criteria, then it doesn't be a part of the results. But there may be scenarios where if it doesn't meet this criteria, you still want it to display. Maybe you're doing some type of error checking, okay? So we're gonna utilize the no drop. Let's highlight everything under number 3. Highlight everything under number 3, please. Copy that under number 3, okay? And let's go ahead and go back to the CIP and let's run, I'm gonna comment out that though. Create a new log search. And paste. Again, I'm going to comment out the parse so you can actually see the messages and understand what's going on. I'm just going to run it for the last 15 minutes. So you, of course, know we're looking at our error messages, okay, from our labs for the last 15 minutes. Okay. The next line of code is going to look at those messages. It says continue on. Let's look for bracket client. Okay, so it says, okay, I'm gonna look. Oh, there's bracket client. So it says the next field is going to be called the client IP. So it's going to grab it. Here's one, here's one, here's one. Now notice this one doesn't meet that criteria. So it's going to be filtered out. It won't be a part of our results because it doesn't match the parse expression. Okay, so if we run that for the last 15 minutes, we'll see where it found the word bracket client. The next field, it parsed out as our IP address. We see that at our field browser and we see it as a column header. I'm looking at 870 results. I'm looking at page 1 of 35. Okay. Let's go ahead and grab, let's see here. Let's grab in number 5, the last 2 lines of code. Number 5, let's grab the last 2 lines of code. Number 5, let's copy that. Last 2 lines of code. And let's go ahead and paste the last 2 lines of code. Let's comment out the last 2 lines of code. Let's comment it out. Okay. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, when we ran this parse statement, it's going to look If it doesn't find something, that's going to be filtered out. At the end of the first parse statement, let's type in the word no drop. One word, no drop. Yeah, David, you're ahead of the game. You're the man. I just took a different way of doing it. Good job. Yep. All right. So again, if you take a look at my code, yours should look like mine. We have line 1 and line 2. We commented it out line 3 and 4. Okay. We want to run this so you can understand what the no drop is going to do for us. When we run this, so it's saying, hey, I'm looking for that pattern, but when I don't find that pattern, still bring back that row. Okay. I'm looking for that pattern, but when I don't find it, still bring back that row. Okay. So that's what the no drop is doing for us in this expression. All right. I'm going to uncomment the next line of code only. It's another parse statement. And it's essentially saying, well, let's look for the phrase mod log SQL. So in the event where there isn't an IP address, we should see the phrase mod log SQL. And I see some of them down there. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and run that. It's going to create a new column called message. So once it found the mod log SQL colon, the next field is going to be called message. So it parsed out the message. Okay. The next where clause is going to filter out as well. It's using the is blank. Okay. It's saying, hey, where my client IP is blank. So for example, I don't have a client IP address here, so it's going to bring back that. I don't have one here, that, and here, and so forth. Okay. Now, I had earlier in my earlier class today, someone asked, well, will the no drop apply to all lines? No, the no drop only applies to the line that it's on. Okay. All right, so let's run that. So now we're only bringing back where we see the messages. Okay. Awesome. Good job. You guys are doing awesome here. Let's continue on here. Let's go back to our lab guide. Now, I'm going to read this to you twice in case it appears on an exam sometime, somewhere. I'll read this to you twice. Okay. The parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field. Again, the parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field. Okay, so let's highlight what's under number 6. Let's copy that and let's go run this in a new log search for 30 days. Again, a new log search for 30 days. I am going to comment out the second line so you can see how the actual GitHub messages are formatted. So we're going against our GitHub log messages. We're using a keyword committer. So we want to bring back all of our committer messages. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. All right, now you can see it's still, mine is still processing, but it'll essentially say done. I can see my total results. Oh, it's running for 30 days, so it might take a while. But again, I can see the word committer highlighted throughout these messages. Okay. The next line of code is looking for the actual email colon. Okay. So again, it's looking for email colon. Once it finds it, the next field after it is going to be called email. So again, here's email colon. The next field after that is going to be called email. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. So we should now have a new field in our field browser called email that's going to be displayed. We have a new column in our results to call email. So it has went and found and parsed out the email addresses. Okay, let's continue on. Let's go ahead and under number 7, let's go ahead and grab the last 3 lines of code under number 7. Again, grab the last 3 lines of code under number 7. All right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't talked about this in this class as of yet. If we want to add a blank row, we place our cursor on the previous row at the end of it. So I have my cursor at the end of the parse statement, and we use Shift Enter or Alt Enter or Shift Return. One of those 3 should give you the ability to add a line, and I'm going to paste. Okay, I am going to comment out the last 3 lines so we can step through them. We already ran the first 2, okay? So it's parsing out the email address and calling it email, okay? The next line of code, I will uncomment. It's using a parse, but it's saying parse the field called email. So we're going to do further parsing on an already parsed field. So it's saying locate the ampersand. Before the ampersand, we're going to call that user. After the ampersand, we're going to call that domain. Okay. So again, it's parsing out of the actual email address. So let's go ahead and run that. We should now see a new field being displayed in our field browser, and we now have a domain and a user column. How do we get those, Odell? Off of the parse statement. Next, we're going to get an aggregate tab. Okay, so we can, good question. Does parse, you're talking about the columns. So here's what it does. It does display your items alphabetically. So, you know, we have user and domain as aliases, but in our columns, you'll see that it has domain, email, and user. So the time and message will always be there, but anything between those will be sorted alphabetically. That's good, James. You're good. You're right. Okay. So again, we're going to now run the count by users for the last 30 minutes. That's going to give us that aggregates tab. Now we're seeing the user and the count of the GitHub committers. Okay. Lastly, we're going to use the top operator. Remember, I talked about this before. The top operator is one of those operators that's going to sort descending order automatically. Okay. So we want the top 5 users by count. Notice how we're using count. We're using the placeholder technique. We're going to run that for the last 30 days. And there you have it. You have your users and the top 5, or in order of descending order, the top 5 users. Okay. Awesome. All right, now, be aware, ladies and gentlemen, that by default, the parse only extracts the first occurrence. Okay. Now that's important because we may have multiple occurrences of a expression that we want to parse out. But by default, this tool only parses out the first occurrence. So let's go ahead and grab what's under the actual number 8. Let's copy and run that in a new log search. Okay. number 8. Close out some of these other ones. All right. Now, first of all, I want you to be aware and see what the snort logs look like. So I'm going to comment out that last line of code. In our snort logs, the messages are even more different. They're formatted differently. So again, I see there's a classification, attempted information leak. There's some sensitive data classification. There's attempted denial, et cetera, et cetera. So again, there's different types of classifications. All right. Now, if we take a look at the message, we see there's one IP address, then there's another IP address. Okay. If we take a look at the next line of code, it's using a parse regex. It's declaring a new field called IP address and looking for a pattern. Okay. If we run that for the last 15 minutes, we will see that newly created column called IP address. But if you take a look at the data, okay, look at the actual data there. If I look at the first line of code, I see that the first IP address has been parsed out successfully. But what about this IP address, ladies and gentlemen? I need that. That's not on line 2. Okay, I need that second IP address. So let's together do it. At the end of the line, let's type in the word multi. Again, at the end of the parse regex, let's type in the word multi. And let's run it again. So now if we had 3, 4, 5, 10, 100 items that we wanted to parse out, we use the multi. And if we take a look, my first one is 158. Okay, so there's the 158. What about this 10224? Oh, if I look at the next row, there's that 10224. Okay, so again, that multi will parse out multiple occurrences for you. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and grab what's under number 10 and create a new log search. I'm going to talk about field extraction rules now. Again, go back to your CIP, create a new log search, and let's talk more about the field extraction rules. Okay. So I'm going to comment out that first line, that second line of code, and I'm going to run the first line. It's basically bringing back my access messages with the keyword of 404s. So I want to bring back all of my 404s over the last 15 minutes. Okay. Now, how did we know that we could use the word status code? Because we actually have status code in our field browser. How did these fields get here? We're not going against JSON logs. We're going against our access logs. So how did these fields get here? Okay, I'm going to digress. You can just watch. You don't need to do this. You can if you want to, but you don't need to do this. I'm going into my navigation panel. I'm going into my manage data down in the main menu. And I'm clicking on the logs. Okay. Now, I'm going to go to my field extraction rule column tab here. And you'll notice that I cannot build a field extraction rule because I am logged in as an analyst. Again, that's only something done by an admin. Okay. But I can view them. So I want to look at this one that's already been created called the demo FER. Okay, let's walk through it. So the name of it is demo FER. Again, it's enabled. Green is good, so it's enabled. When is it going to be applied? At ingestion time. So that means the fields will be extracted and stored when data is received by Sumo Logic. Okay. What is it going to be applied to? What's the scope? Well, it's going to be applied to Labs Apache Access. So whenever you use this scope during ingestion time, this parsing statement is going to parse out these fields for you. Wait a minute, Odell, I don't understand. What's the advantage of that? Well, during ingestion, it's parsing these fields out when I run this, so I don't have to parse them out. So they're available to me over in the field browser so I can utilize them. So this is how these fields got here based on the field extraction rule. The benefit, it improves performance. Okay, if I look at the next line of code, the next line of code, and it says count by src IP. Where in the world did that come from, Odell? If I look at my field browser, that was one of the non-displayed fields, but it was made available to me during ingestion time based on the field extraction rule. Okay, so again, that's how you're able to build your queries. These fields you can use in your queries. They're over here based on the extraction rules. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. I, of course, am going to get a new aggregate tab. It's going to give me my source IPs and all of the counts of status codes that are 404s. So here are all the counts of status codes of 404s from my IP addresses. Awesome. All right, let's take a look at the quiz questions at the bottom of the screen here. True or false? CSV, JSON, split, key values are all parsing operators. True or false, ladies and gentlemen? Question number one. Maybe I'm muted. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. All right, so that first question, quiz question, ladies and gentlemen, is true. It's true. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you for participating. Appreciate it. Yes, Cynthia, you're correct. It's true. Question number two, once a field has been parsed, it cannot be parsed any further. Absolutely false. False. You guys saw that. And then finally, number three, fields parsed by the field extraction rule are available in the field browser. That's absolutely true. Okay. You guys are awesome. Good job. For those of you that are participating, thank you. Let's continue on to lab number 4. All right. We want to get into conditional operators. We want to use operators that allow us to do if-then operations. We're going to look at our Apache logs for the last 60 minutes. And we want to see the number of successful requests. That's our status codes of 200s. And we want to see a number of our return requests, which are a status code of 404s. Okay, so let's highlight everything under number 1. Under number 1, let's copy that. Let's go back to the CIP and let's create a new log search. You can close any tabs that you have open and create a new log search. All right, let's paste. And I, of course, am going to comment out these lines so we can step through the code here. All right, so let's go ahead and use our technique that we have. Highlight options and drag and comment. All right, so you guys are aware that we're going against our access messages, and we're going to do it for the last 60 minutes. So I'm going to change the time period into 60 minutes. All right, so if we take a look at our messages, the next line of code says, hey, we want to parse by looking for http/1.1. So I found my http/1.1. It says the next field after that is going to be called status code. So the next field after the HTTP is going to be called status code. So that's what that line is doing over the last 60 minutes. So we have a new column called status codes. It parsed out where it found that actual expression and parsed out the actual status codes. Okay. Now, remember, ladies and gentlemen, the technique that Odell told you about. If you were unsure of all of the types of status codes, what could you do? I could go over here to my field browser and just click on status codes. And I can see, oh, of these 29,000, 22,000 of them are 200s, and so forth and so on. Okay. Now, the next line of code says, let's go ahead and create a condition. If the status code equals 200, if it equals 200, we're going to create a new column called successes. We'll put a 1 in it if its status code is true of being 200. We'll put a 0 in it if it's false of being 200. Okay. If status code equals 200, 1 being true, 0 being false. That's going to be in a new column. So we run that over the last 60 minutes. And you can see here that we have zeros where there isn't a 200, and we have ones where there is. If we take a look at the next line of code, it says, okay, let's create another new column called client errors. And let's look at our status codes that are equal to 404s. And in that client errors, we're going to put a 1 if the 404 is true. We'll put a 0 if there isn't a 404 for false. Okay. So again, we're using the if then over the last 60 minutes. We now have a new column called client errors. When we see 404s, we see a true. When we don't see a 404, we see a false. Okay. When we don't see 200s, we should also see a false. All right. Now, we now want to use an aggregate. We're going to sum our successes. Well, what are our successes, Odell? Well, that's that alias we created for our 200s. And we're going to call it success count. All right. We're also going to sum our client errors. Well, where do we get that from, Odell? Well, we got that from the 404s. We're going to call that client errors count. Now, this is going to be displayed on a new tab because we haven't summed as an aggregate over the last 60 minutes. And there we have it. We have our original messages tab, and we have our aggregates tab where we can see our total success counts and client error counts. Okay. All right, now, we're not going to do the test your knowledge, but I am going to speak to it so you can understand what it's asking you to do. You can do these on your own, okay? So in our original query, we used the equal and we equated it to a value, okay? Down in your test your knowledge, you're using a matches and you're using a wildcard. So we're matching anything that begins with 4, 400, 4,100, 41 million, etc. Okay. Again, we're using a matches and anything that begins with 5. Okay. So the difference here is one is equating to a single value. The other is matching based on a wildcard. Again, that's something you can do on your own. Let's go ahead and click on lab number 5 using subqueries. Now, some of you may be familiar with SQL. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. And you may know that when you built a subquery, that inner query value, the inner query's output is used to run the outer query. That's the same concept here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to run this particular lab in 3 steps. We're going to do the parent, then we're going to do the child, then we're going to bring them together. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and grab what's under number 1 here. Let's grab that. That's going to be our parent. And let's create a new log search. Let's go back to the CIP, create a new log search, and let's run our parent. Okay, let me explain what's going on here. Now, the parent is bringing back the access, all of our access messages for the last 15 minutes. That's awesome. But what we'd like to do is use a keyword, but we don't know what keyword to use, what IP address to use. We don't know, okay? So if we go back to our lab guide, let's go ahead and grab what's under number 2. Let's copy that. go back and create a new log search. Don't close anything, just create a new one. So I want you to be able to toggle back if you need to. Okay, and let's paste. And again, I'm going to step you through this code. All right, so the first line is going against our errors. Okay, so we're saying go back to our lab Apache error and look for the keyword file doesn't exist. So look for that for the last 15 minutes. All right, so I see, you see, we see, here's our results. I see my error message. It has the phrase file doesn't exist. But if you really eyeballed it, ladies and gentlemen, you can kind of see that these IP addresses are all the same. They're all the same, okay? Anyhow, the next statement says, okay, continue on. Of those file doesn't exist messages, look for the word client. And before the client, there's two fields that we want to capture. We want to capture the time and the era. So again, look for the word client, capture the time and the era. And then after the word client, capture the IP address. So this second line of code is saying create time, era, and IP. How are you creating that? You're looking for the client. The first field after it is going to be called the IP. The two fields before it is going to be called time and era. Okay, so that's what that line is doing. Let's run that for the last 15 minutes. So we now have two additional columns. We have the era and the IP. Remember, time and message are already going to be there for you. So we have era and the IP address. Okay, as you can see, all these IP addresses are the same. The next line is going to go ahead and count up all the IP addresses. Okay, it says count by IP address. So all of these IP addresses are the same. So it should give me that number and a count. We got an aggregates tab because we're using an aggregate. The last line, you don't really need a top K. A top K is for ranking. A top K is for ranking. Well, we only have one IP address, so what are we ranking? But anyhow, we wanted to demonstrate that operator, so we're going to go ahead and run that. And of course, it should rank as number one. If it ranks as something else, something's wrong. All right, so again, we ran the top K, and this is the IP address that has the most amount of file doesn't exist messages. Okay, we want to use this IP address as a keyword. Okay, now let's go back. Finally, let's go back to our last line of code in our lab. Let's grab number 4, copy that, go back to our CIP and add a new log search and paste. And again, I'll fix this. One thing you want to do here if you're following along, I want to put this pipe compose on a separate line. So I'm putting my cursor in front of the pipe symbol, and I'm going to use that technique, that shift return or alt enter, so I can add it to the next row. Then I'll go ahead and walk you through this here code. So here's our parent query. It says source category equals lab Apache access. We're using the operator subquery colon. Again, we're using the operator subquery colon. Everything after the colon to the closing bracket is my child query. Remember, we had underscore source category labs Apache error. Look for the keyword file doesn't exist. Parse out my time, my error, and my IP address. Count by the IP address. Top count the actual count. So all of that inwardness is our child query. So the last thing that we added was the compose operator the IP address as a keyword. So the moral of the story here, if you want to use subqueries, you're going to use the phrase subquery colon, put it in a bracket, of course, and then you're also going to use the phrase compose and keyword. So now when we run this for the last 15 minutes, it's using the inner IP address as a keyword for the actual parent query. So I'm bringing back all of these in my access messages. Okay. All right. Now, FYI, ladies and gentlemen, at your leisure, you can come back to this lab number 5, and you click on the subqueries and get more information about subqueries. Okay. Let's go ahead and click on lab 6 and plot items on a map. And let me speak to this before we do anything. All right. So I'm going to right click on the Geo lab, the Geo lookup, and launch that in a new tab, and I'll take a look at it for us. Now, one of the benefits, or one of the other benefits that you have in our tool, is we have a relationship with NewStar. Okay, NewStar populates a table for us. Okay, an IP table for us. Okay, public IP addresses, NewStar will populate for us. Excuse me, they won't populate the IP address, they'll populate information. Okay. What we need to do is provide NewStar an IP address. Okay. So we provide an IP address. NewStar is going to give us the latitude, the longitude, and the count. And if we want other fields, we can get those as well. But what we need to provide is the IP address. And once we provide that IP address, that would enable us to use the map. Okay. All right. So I digressed. You know about the items. Let's go ahead and highlight what's under number 2. And let's right click and copy. All right, let's go ahead and create a new log search. And we'll run this for the last 15 minutes. I am going to step through the code for you. All right, so running the Labs Apache Access, you're familiar with that, so I'll quickly run that. No big deal there. You know how the messages are formatted. The next statement is going to parse out the IP address. So you can see the IP address is right there. It's looking for it. It's going to find it. It's looking for dash dash. Anything before dash dash, parse out. So that's what that's doing. It's creating that new column called client IP address. Again, if it didn't meet the criteria, it's not going to display. It's filtered out. Okay. Now, you want to get in the habit of reading lookup statements from right to left. All right. So in that above parse statement, we parsed out the client IP. We are providing the client IP for a lookup table. Okay, so we're going to go look it up, the IP address, bring the IP address over, look it up in the table, and bring back our longitude and latitude. Okay, the key thing here is we need to provide the IP address. So we're running that. We now have 2 columns called latitude and longitude added to our results. There's the IP, there's the latitude and the longitude. Okay. Right now we have no way of doing any mapping. Okay. There's nothing to click on. Okay. In order to get a map, we need an aggregate. Okay. So we're using the count of the latitude and longitude. Over the last 15 minutes. So now we're seeing an aggregates tab. We're seeing the latitude and the longitude, and we're seeing the count from that item. This is in no particular order, so we want to sort by the count. This is one of those operators that sorts in descending order automatically by default. So when we run this query over the last 15 minutes, we can see that our latitudes and longitudes are sorted based on count in descending order. Now, having the latitude, the longitude, and the count allows us to use this icon for our map. So the little map icon, we can click on that over to the right. Now we're displaying our latitudes and longitudes and our counts across the globe. Okay. Again, you can zoom in by double clicking, dragging, as I mentioned. You can drill down to the street level. Okay. All right, awesome. All right, there are other optional test your knowledges that you can do on your own. We're not going to go through those. Just be aware that they're there for you. Let's go on to lab number 7. We want to calculate changes and moving averages. We're going to calculate those by using the diff and the smooth operator. All right, let's first take a look at the diff. What is the diff, Odell? Well, the diff is going to allow you to get the difference between rows. It's going to calculate the rate of change in the field between consecutive rows. So that's what the diff operator is going to do for us. Let's go ahead and copy what's under number 1, the entire query. We're going to run this for the last 15 minutes. All right, let's go back and add a new log search and paste. I'll step you through this code. I'm going to just comment out the very last line. All right, so again, you're looking at all of your access messages. You're creating buckets. This time slice allows us to create time-based buckets. So we're going to create 1-minute buckets. Okay. It's then going to allow us to count by our time slice. Notice we're using that technique where it's the underscore because it's an operator. We're using that placeholder technique. And then finally, we're going to sort by the time slice in ascending order. And we're physically typing ascending because we know that the sort will sort descending automatically. So we run that for the last 15 minutes. And we can see our original messages tab where we have all of our access messages. We can see on our aggregates tab, we have our 1-minute buckets. So we see our 1-minute buckets. They are assorted in ascending order. So the time goes up and we see our counts. Okay. The last line of code is going to allow us to utilize the difference where the tool will use some math on those rows. So again, we have an aggregates tab. We can go ahead and see that at the first minute, that first minute bucket, I had a total count of 500, or excuse me, I had a total count of over 275. There's no difference. The second minute, we take the top count and subtract it from the bottom count, and we get the difference. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're taking the top number from the next number and get the difference. Top number from the next number, get the difference, and so forth and so on. Okay. Odell, why am I getting negative numbers? If that bigger number is higher than or the lower, that's why you're getting a negative number. Okay. Awesome. Good questions. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the smooth operator. So I'm going to right click. You can just watch this and open up a new tab. I'd like for you to know what we're doing so you can go into the help to find out more information. The smooth is going to give us a rolling or moving averages of a field. Okay. It allowed us to give those variations. Okay. It reveals trends in our data sets. So we're going to use the smooth operator. All right, let's go ahead and grab everything under number 2. We're going to look for our 404 occurrences for the last 15 minutes. So let's copy that. Go back to the CIP, create a new log search, and paste. All right, I'm just going to comment out the last line just to kind of walk you through the code again. If I run this, again, it's going to look at my access messages, bring back all my 404s. It's going to render in 1-minute buckets. It's going to count it's going to count up everything, my time slice. It's going to sort in descending order. So we have an aggregates tab. We see our time buckets, our minute buckets in ascending order. And we see our error counts minute by minute, okay? Now we want to use the smooth operator to get a rolling average. So we're using the smooth operator over our error counts, okay? And we're going to go ahead and call that rolling averages over the last 15 minutes. So basically, we take the first number and the bottom number, we add them two up. So you get 35, you divide it by 2, you get the rolling average. You add the top 3 numbers divided by 3, you get the rolling average. 4 numbers and so forth and so on. Numbers are great, but sometimes a visualization is always or sometimes better. So let's go ahead and click on the let's click on the line chart. So now we're seeing our error counts and our rolling averages. This could be quite confusing in a display, okay? So we might want to take this a step further and enhance. To enhance our charts, one of the techniques we can use is go to the gear symbol. So if you click on that gear symbol over to the right, we could go down to the phrase change series. We could look at our error counts. We could see the chart type for our error counts is a line. If we click the drop down arrow, we could change it from a line to a column and then click save. So now it's easier to visualize our rolling averages over our error counts on a minute by minute basis. Okay. All right, let's go on to the next lab. We finished all of that. Good job. Let's go ahead and find the needle in the haystack in number 8. Let's click on lab number 8, finding the needle in the haystack. And again, we can just copy the first line of code. We're going to run against our snort logs. You can just copy the first line of code. Okay. We want to utilize the log reduce. Okay. Now that log reduce is very helpful to you. Okay. It's going to go ahead and look for patterns and group those patterns together. Okay, so you can find any type of anomalies, any type of objects that stand out. Okay, so that's what we're going to use the log reduce for. All right, let's go ahead and go back to our CIP. And let's go ahead and run our snort logs. We want to be able to look at our security data to identify any intrusion activity. Okay, so any unusual activity that's intrusions. Going back to the CIP, creating a new log search. And we're not going to use that, pardon me, we're not going to use the actual log reduce right away. I want you to take a look at the snort messages first, okay? So we're running our snort logs for the last 15 minutes. Now let's just take a look at them so you can understand them. So I see there's some lab class, some web application attacks. There's some attempted information leaks. There's some network detection scans. There's some success. There's a lot of these classifications. I'm looking at over 1,000 messages. I don't want to go through all 1,000 messages. I don't want to go through 61 pages. I want to utilize some of that machine learning, some of those analytics that Sumo Logic talks about. So in order to use some of those analytics, we're going to use the log reduce. When we click on the log reduce, the tool adds a pipe statement and says, okay, I'm going to log reduce these items. Pardon me. So essentially what it's doing of those over 1,000 messages, it's saying, hey, I am going to go ahead and look for patterns. So of those 1,000, over 1,000 messages, 790 are the attempted information leak. 15 of them are the successful administrator privilege gains, and so forth and so on. So the advantage of using that log reduce will allow me to find any type of anomalies, okay? So I can find them rather quickly. Now, let's talk about a few more things. You'll notice under the action column that I have a promote icon and a demote icon. Let's imagine that I worked for all of you. I work for all of you, okay? And one of the things that I have to do is I have to give you this report, okay? You would then take the report and evaluate what needs to be looked at, okay? But, but I know the data, okay? And if I look at this message, this attempted information leak, I know that we just installed a patch and we have a few problems with it. So I'm aware of that. So I don't want you to have to make a big stink out of it. I'm going to go over to my actions and I'm going to demote it. If you take a look at the relevancy, you'll see the number is now 0. So when you get the report, you see that this is something that's not something major. It has a relevancy of 0. Okay. Now let me put it back. On the other hand, if I deem this to be very important, this is a leak. We got problems here. We're losing money. It's a data leak. So I can go over here to the promote and notice that the relevancy now changes to 10. 10 is the highest relevancy where 0 is the lowest. Okay. So again, I have that ability. You have that ability to promote or demote the relevancy of an item. Okay. Over to the right of the actions is the pencil here. You can edit the actual object, but you cannot delete it. Okay. Now, you have also available to you, you can drill in on the number count. Now, notice what happens when I drill in on that link of the number count. My actual query expression changes. Now I'm looking at all of those 790 messages. Okay. Taking it a step further, let's imagine that you wanted to find out, was there anything that led up or anything before this error message happened? So what you have, ladies and gentlemen, what we have the ability to go to the host and look at any messages before or after, any surrounding messages. So we want to see if anything led up to this. We can look at the name and we can look at the category of the surrounding messages. So each one of these have surrounding messages that we can actually look at. All right. Going back to the lab guides, we did all of that. Awesome. Let's go ahead on to lab number 9. And we can go ahead and copy what's under number 1 here. We're going to use the log compare. Okay. The log compare allows you to compare your current messages, current message period, to a prior time period. So maybe I want to compare the last 15 minutes of log messages to yesterday, 24 hours ago. Same period, same time, just 24 hours ago. Or maybe I want to compare it to last week so I can see if there's any patterns or anything like that. So that's the log compare. Again, some of that machine learning is what we're talking about. All right, so you already copied under number 1 here. We're going to run this for 60 minutes. All right, so let's go ahead and copy that, create a new log search. And paste. All right, now I'm going to comment out that log compare just so you can see what we're bringing back for the last 60 minutes. So we're bringing back all of our 404s from our labs access, Apache access. So you can go through here and eyeball it. I have all 404s. Okay. The next line of code is saying, okay, let's compare these 404, these current 404 messages for the last 60 minutes to a time shift of 24 hours ago. Okay, so let's run that. Now we still have the messages tab, but since we're doing a log compare, we now have a signatures tab. Okay, that signatures tab gives us a top and bottom number. The top number is today's current number, so we have 130 of these. Yesterday, compared to yesterday, it's a 30% increase. So compared to 24 hours ago, it's a 30% increase from yesterday, okay? Again, here's a negative increase, it's negative 4.8. So again, you'll see that bottom number is the percent difference from 24 hours ago, okay? If I page through this, ladies and gentlemen, I'll eventually start seeing the word new. So this expression happened twice. It's new. It wasn't there 24 hours ago, so it's new. If I continue to scroll through, ladies and gentlemen, I'll also see something that says gone. So it wasn't there today and it wasn't there yesterday. It's gone. Okay, this is that message. So again, all this comes from the time shift. Also be aware, ladies and gentlemen, you have the capability of changing the time period. If you use the log compare, it's going to default to the last 24 hours. You can click the drop down arrow to the right of it and use 7 days, or you can customize it. Okay, let's go back and get some more code here. Let's go ahead and grab the under number 3, which really should be number 2. Under number 3, let's go ahead and copy that last line of code where it says where ABS delta percentage greater than 25. Let's go back to the CIP. We want to add a new line of code. So let's place our cursor at the end of the log compare. And let's use the technique shift return or alt enter, whatever you use to add that new line. And let's paste. So this last line of code, it says where your absolute value of the underscore delta percentage is greater than 25. So what it's going to look at is all of those percent numbers, that bottom number, it's going to bring it back if it's greater than 25. That's either negative or positive. Now it's also going to bring back if it's gone or if it's also new. So let's go ahead and run that for the last 60 minutes. So we can see in our signatures tab, we now see our results where the percentages are greater than 25. So that's either negative or positive. So this first one is positive 27, positive 69. There's a negative 40. Again, all that's greater than the absolute value. And if I page through, I still get my new and my gones. Okay. All right, let's bring back all of our new. So let's go back and grab the last line of code under number 4. Let's bring back all of our new items. Okay, so let's grab the last line of code under number 4. Let's go back to the CIP and replace that where clause with what we have in our copy. Let's paste that. Now this where says only bring back the new. Okay, so over the last 24 hours, just bring back the new. Don't bring back the gone. So maybe in this case, we need the new is going to indicate to us where we need to add some more code, or maybe we need to add a fix or something. Okay. All right, so here we see it only brings back items that have the category of new. So that's what that is new is doing for us. Okay. All right, let's continue on. We got a couple more. We're almost done, ladies and gentlemen. Hang in there with me. Let's go ahead and click on lab number 10, identifying out of the ordinary events. So we're going to use an outlier, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we start to look at the standard deviation and the mean. The outlier has 4 arguments that we need to populate. It has the window, which calculates the mean and the standard deviation. It has the threshold that calculates the standard deviation for any violations. Okay. It has consecutive that determines the violation indicator. And then it has the direction, which allows you to see above and below the threshold. The plus will show you above and the minus will show you below. Okay. So again, this is our outlier. We want to be able to identify any values that are out of sequence or unexpected. All right, so we're grabbing everything under number 4, and we're going to run that for the last 60 minutes. So let's go back to the CIP, create a new log search. I'm going to step you through this real quickly. I'm going to comment out the very last line of code. And again, we're running this for 60 minutes. All right. So again, we're bringing back our access log messages where the status codes are 404. Whoops, I ran. We're rendering in 1-minute buckets. We're going to count our status codes as error count. So again, here's our original messages tab. We're bringing back only our 404s. Okay. We're creating 1-minute buckets. We're counting, which gives us the aggregates tab. And that's how we get the error count. Okay. So this is a minute-by-minute breakdown of errors per minute. Now we want to add the outlier. Okay. And we're going to run that. The consecutive window is set to 10. So that's going to determine the standard deviation. The consecutive is 1. So we'll just see 1 indicator. The threshold is 3. So that's going to be the up and lower boundary. So we're going to run that for the last 60 minutes. So if we take a look at the data, the numbers first, and we can see where there's going to be an indicator. And I want to see some more indicators. So I'm going to change my threshold to, I'm going to change this number to make it easier to display a 1.1. Okay, and then I'll run that again. And maybe I'll see some more items. Okay, so there you go. All right, so I have more items. So let's take a look at where you see an error indicator and an error violation. So on my row, I see the error count is 25. The upper value is 21, and the lower value is 14. So this is definitely out of the bounds. So here's the error indicator because it's out of bounds, and then here's the violation. Okay. Now, the numbers are great. We can identify what's going on by looking at the numbers and evaluating. But it's even better to look at it on a graph. So let's look at it on a line chart. So that light blue background, that's your upper and lower boundaries. Okay. These are your actual outliers, those arrows above. So if I only wanted to see the above items, I can remove the minus sign, run it again, and I'm only seeing the items above the threshold. Okay. There you have it, only above the threshold. If I wanted to see the ones below, I would change that, of course, to minus. And now I only see the ones below the threshold. Okay. When we came in here initially, we saw a plus and a minus, and that's what I'm going to leave it as. Okay. Awesome. All right. Let's go on to identifying future trends in lab number 11. We're going to use the predict operator. Now, the predict operator has two options, two types of predict operators, I should say. There's the linear, which allows us to give a regression algorithm, which produces the fields of output. Okay, so that's more of a line. And then there's the auto regression model. So there's two types of predictors. This one uses a time-based numerical stamp for future values. Okay, we are going to use the predict operator in a linear regression model. Okay, let's go back to our lab guide. Let's grab what's under number 11. Let's run this for the last 60 minutes. All right, let's go ahead and add a new log search. Thanks for your patience. You guys are doing awesome. We're almost done. I know it's a lot of information. All right, I am going to comment everything out except the predict. You guys know we're bringing back our 404s. We're creating 1-minute buckets, and we're counting our status codes. Okay, and we're going to run that. So we get an aggregate. We get our 1-minute buckets. Okay, they're not in any order. We're going to use the predict operator, which will put them in descending order. We're predicting by the 1-minute. Okay, so you and I can see in the descending order, 757. Okay, I can see that I had 20 errors. I can see the prediction and the error count. But if I scroll down, I start to see no error counts and no error count errors. So I don't see anything. It's better to view this type of prediction in a line chart. So let's go ahead and click on the line chart. And you can see in my example that the error messages are in a trending downward. They're trending down. So that predict is telling me, hey, your error count is going to trend down in the future. That's good to know. Okay, so that's the advantage of that predict. All right, 2 more and we're done. Okay, let's go ahead and we want to go ahead and click on lab 12. We're going to utilize the transaction operator. Now, this is good for if you want to evaluate the status of something, the state. So, for example, let's say you had a ordering company and you wanted to keep track of what stage the ordering is in. Okay, so again, transaction operator is kind of cool for you. It's an analytical, provides insight into correlated events. It identifies any issues in the actual data flow. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy everything under number 3. Copy everything under number 3. And let's run this for the last 24 hours. Go back to the CIP. Let's create a new log search and run this for the last 24 hours. I, of course, am going to comment out. Well, no, I won't comment. I'll just talk through this. Okay, so again, we're looking at our source category as the econ-mark data log. We're parsing out the IP address. We're returning the line even if it doesn't meet the actual expression. We're utilizing the transaction on that IP, and these are our statuses, our stages. Okay, so let's run that for the last 24 hours. If we look at our messages tab, we see in the state, there's overshipped, there's confirmation, there's other types of states. Okay, if I click on my browser, I have confirmation shipped, it's in the cart, etc. Now, if I go to my aggregates tab, I can see the from state and the to state and the count. Now, this allows us to bring up and utilize another feature in our tool, and that's utilizing the actual sand key icon. So on your aggregates tab, if you go all the way over, you'll see this here sand key. It actually says flowchart. But again, you click on the sand key flowchart icon. Now you can see the status. I can see shipped info. confirmation info, and in the cart. So for example, to explain this a little bit by a scenario, let's imagine my wife and I went to the grocery store. I'm pushing the shopping cart. I put an item into the shopping cart. I turn around to get another item. My wife takes the item I put in out of the cart. So again, I can measure the state, the stage and where it's at. That's the advantage of the transaction. Okay. All right, last one here, ladies and gentlemen, you guys made it. Creating meaningful alerts. First of all, I want to share with you a blog post that talks about what a meaningful alert is and when you should be alerted. So this is a great read. Hopefully you find it resourceful. I'm going to share it with you. But again, it's helpful if you want to know what's a meaningful alert and when should alerts be actionable. Okay. Let's go ahead and copy under number 5 here, everything under number 5. We, of course, want to, rather than alerting on simple counts, we want to learn to alert on that notify on when our 404s increase at a higher rate than our 200s. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new log search and paste that in there. All right, and I'll walk you through this. So we're looking at our access messages. We want to bring back our status codes of 200 and 400s. We're going to create 1-minute buckets. We want to evaluate our 200s by putting a 1 or a 0 for true or false, respectively, in our successes column. We're going to do the same thing for our 404s, a 1 or 0 in our fails column. We're then going to sum all of our successes and call it success count. We're going to sum our fails and call it fail count. Okay. We're then going to create a failure percentage by dividing our fail count by our success counts and adding the fail count and multiply that by 100. That's going to give us our percentages. Okay. I'll use all of that for the last 15 minutes. We have an aggregates tab because we have the sum. We're seeing the success and the fail count and the percentage. Okay. Now we're going to use an outlier operator so we can identify any outliers. So let's run that. Okay. And we're going to focus on the field rate percentage. The failure rate percentage is what we want to look at. Okay. Now, we want to go ahead and display this on a chart, so we can use a line chart. Right now, we only have one item. If we want to increase this, we can always change the threshold. We can move that down to 2 or something like that. But anyhow, the last thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we only get notified about items that have a threshold greater than 0. So we're going to copy this last where clause. Again, we only want to see items. I'm going to go back to my numbers where the threshold indicator is greater than 0. That's the only time we want to see it. Okay. So we're going to add that last where clause by adding a use the shift return or alt enter and then paste and then run that. So these would be the scenarios where I only have one. If I increase the time, I probably would get more value. So I'm going to do 60 minutes. So these are the scenarios where our failure rate percentage is greater than 0. Okay. Now, how do we create an alert on this, ladies and gentlemen? We go to the icon in our search, either the save icon, that floppy disk icon, or you go to the more and you choose save as. You go down to the phrase schedule this search. Right now, it's never going to run. I click the drop down to choose any time. I'll choose every 15 minutes. It then gives me more options. Okay, the key thing to remember is we have different types of alert mechanisms. You can do email, script action, you can create a webhook to do a Slack, and so forth and so on. Okay. All right, I'm just going to throw this in here real quickly, and we're done. Okay, so sumologic.com. Okay, so this is where it's going to be set. I can save this. Now, if I go back to my navigation panel, click on my personal folder, I can see that newly created save searches here. I can either go back to the search and click on the three dots and choose edit, or I can go in my navigation panel, click on the three dots and choose edit. To turn the actual schedule off, you click on edit the schedule and you choose run frequency never. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any questions? All right, so it's time now for you to take the exam. Okay, how can I see all your alerts? Very good question, David. So if you were to go into your alert icon, this tab here, you should be able to see the alerts. Okay. All right, now, so you all, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to go ahead and log out of our training environment. How do you log out of the training environment, Odell? You go ahead and make sure your navigation panel is visible. You click on the training ID that you logged in as, okay? So again, you sign out there. Then you log in to your company's Sumo Logic environment. Oh, I forgot to do this. Sorry about that. Let me quickly log in. I want to demonstrate this to you before you get started if you haven't done this before, but I need to get into our intranet real quickly. All right, so again, you're going to log into your company's environment. Give me a second, Maria, I'll show you that shortly. Once you log into your company's environment, you then want to go to your home tab, the certification link, click on Get Certified. That's going to open up our skill jar. Then you're going to go ahead and also click on Get Certified. And you and I have just completed the Search Mastery. So you and I are going to take the Search Mastery. Click on that. You're going to register quickly. Just click it on the click. It's 30 questions, 60 minutes. You need 75 to pass. It's open book, open text, open labs, open material. Then you're going to go ahead and click next. And then you're going to go ahead and take the exam. I will put the Uber Eats link in the chat shortly. So which of the commands might be used to get the data to create a map? All right, so we know we needed latitude and longitude. And remember, I told you we needed to provide the IP address. Okay, so none of these looks like what I told you. So I'll click on this one. You're going to go through any of them. If you have this question, you might get it right if I got it right. So I'll scroll through here. You'll do all those questions. You'll click next. Woohoo, I got one right. You'll click submit. Now, if you didn't pass, if you click on submit, you can take it again. Take it as many times as you like, okay? Now, yeah, let me just quickly do here. All right, so let me stop here. So on behalf of all of the trainers here at Sumo Logic, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to present to you. For those of you that are going to take the exam, good luck. I'll be here for an hour to assist you. For those of you that don't have time to take the exam, you can take the exam anytime you want to. Okay. Good luck. We have our admin class tomorrow. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a good weekend, a good rest of your week. Thank you. And those of you that aren't taking tests, you can go ahead and log out. After you're done with the test, you can log out of the actual Zoom session. Okay, I'll go ahead and be quiet and then put in the chat your items. Okay, and I'll show you, Maria, the syntax as well. You're welcome, Matthew.